Welcome to the Talent Empowerment Podcast, my friends, where we share the stories of glorious humans so you can lift up your organizations, your teams, and your community. I am your humble host, Tom Finn, and on the show today, we have a very special person. She's a grief specialist for individuals and businesses. She has transformed herself into an entrepreneur that helps others. Her name is Dr. Birgitte Tan, and she is on the line with us today. Dr. Tan, welcome.
Thank you so much, Tom. It's an honor and a delight to be with you here today.
Well, thank you for being with us. You've got a great story, and I can't wait to get to it. If you haven't had a chance to meet Dr. Tan, let me just introduce you to her. She has successfully helped more than 25,000 people move through and beyond grief, and she's done that in a way where she really relates well based on her experience. And you might ask why? Well, she's a certified grief specialist. She's a speaker. She's an author. And she's a former veterinarian oncologist. Let me say that again, a former veterinarian oncologist. Now, Dr. Tan will provide you with effective, evidence-based tools that will help you feel better immediately and recover from your heartbreak, even when understanding and insight and potentially mindset coaching have failed you. She's got a real gift. And before we get into her background and her training and all the amazing things she's done, I've just got to start with, what's grief? What do we define that as, and what's a grief specialist?
Thank you so much, Tom. So many people think grief are only the big four: death, divorce, diagnosis, and job loss. But the true definitions of grief is the unsettling feelings caused by any change, losses, or hope unmet. Let me ask you, do you know anyone in your life who has not experienced any change in the last 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, I think we all have, right? We've all experienced a tremendous amount of change in the last 2 or 3 years. Some of it self-imposed, some of it, globally imposed, so to speak.
And even self-imposed, so to say, change, if it causes enough unsettling feeling. Not all change will cause grief, just like not everything that happen in life will make us stress, but many changes can cause us to have grief, even if it is something seemingly so-called self-imposed, like a good thing where getting a promotion or moving to a dream home or getting married. And let's answer your second question. What is a grief specialist? So grief specialists, we focus on grief. And in general, we help people move through and beyond their grief using simple grief classes, not the same as counseling.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, counseling is a different modality and a very much different capabilities, but also different laws and rules at the state level, certainly here in the United States, that warrant a different set of parameters. And so how did we get here, though? Help us understand where this entrepreneurship came from, because you started in veterinary science and as an oncologist in this space, which is super unique just to begin with. And then you've moved into being this really profound book writer and entrepreneur. Where did this all start?
Thank you. So it started out when I was about 5 years old, back in the day. So I've experienced grief since I was about 5, and I grew up in an entrepreneur family. And as all good parents, they say, you know what, the best thing for you to do, particularly if you're in the traditional Asian family, they say the best thing for you to do is to either become a doctor, an engineer, or a lawyer. Well, I'm not a fan of math or physics. I'm not a fan of laws and all these things. I can't remember them. And I love animals. And so I said, well, apparently I got to become a doctor. Therefore, I become a veterinarian because a doctor for animal. And in there, I think because of my life experiencing grief since I was the age of 5, I was able to relate with people's emotion, much more than many of my colleagues. And that might have drawn me to, in the first 7 years, I did emergency. And then from there, the way the science and everything, I was drawn to the oncology. But all along, the number one thing that I did alongside, as well as in addition to being a doctor somehow, some way, was to help people with the emotions and the grief and navigating the challenge, whether it's an acute or it's a chronic, which is or more chronic, so to say, protracted in the oncology realm. And at some point with the pandemic, I decided that it's my calling to be able to help people beyond the hospital and do the grief part full time, as well as expand to the workplace. I used to work with mostly individual.
Yeah, so this is really interesting for our entrepreneur friends out there, because you've gone from a very specialized business, which is veterinary science, and you've moved into entrepreneurship in really a meaningful way that really touches you and things that you think you can give to the world. It's your gift. And when I hear somebody say, my gosh, I've been doing this since I was 5, but my parents told me to go into veterinary science, right? I had to be a doctor because that's the way it was in our family. And then years later, you decide to turn it around and do that one thing that has driven you since you were 5. It just warms my heart, because there's so many people holding back that haven't taken that leap of faith. Where did you find the confidence to do this?
So a few things for the confidence. First is know that you are to be qualified. I mean, there is one of my mentor. I'm also trained in success coaching. One of my mentor is a well-known dream builder or vision builder. You can be a dreamer where you just say, I want to do this. And then you just, jump off the cliff, so to say. That might not be the most ideal thing. But on the other hand, you say, this is what's calling me. And then take the step by step by step. I am certified through 3 different institutions. I'm not a therapist, but I'm certified through 3 different institutions to help people with grief in an all-encompassing manner. And I'm trained by the 4th one. So get the qualifications, get what is it that you need, and then start working toward that. With me, I have been helping people individual, and then later on, actually in the workplace, as I was still serving as a doctor. So build your path there. And then at some point, you do need to be able to say, okay, you know what? I have built enough path, but that you cannot get into the next door if you keep holding on to the last one. But if you set yourself up that way, then it's a little bit easier. And there is another part that we know that many people say, it's a study that shows with many elderly who was at the last days of their life. And in that study, they asked this elderly and they said, so what's your regret most? And they discover that people do not regret things that they do. They regret things they did not do. So if you set your path and allow support, allow mentoring. I have support all along. I have support now. I have mentors in terms of whatever you're transitioning in your life. If you're transitioning to become an entrepreneur, allow the correct support. Just like with grief, you want to allow the correct support. Otherwise, you might spin around in a way that you don't want to. Allow the correct support all along.
Yeah, I love the way you frame that, because the courage that it takes to go from a very specific discipline, in your case, veterinary oncology, and build the training path, build the skills, go and get the certifications, take the time and energy in your non-working hours to build up the new version of you, takes a lot of courage. But when you break away from the old and you create this new version of yourself, it feels amazing, right?
And it is. And one other thing I would say for people who are in the workplace and they're like, I'm not sure being an entrepreneur here. So because sometimes I grew up in an entrepreneur family, but sometimes some of us don't.
Yeah.
You know, right where you are. This is one thing I also do success coaching. So in other words, with my grief, I help people with grief, but many people who have been through grief say, what's next? And I do help people with that. So one thing we help you to do is recognize right where you are. What can you do? And even being a team member, working in a workplace, being an employee, you can become an intrapreneur. So right where you are, what can you do? And this will be in a win-win way. Instead of detracting, which is one thing I did, I work for a company. I didn't own my own hospital. I work for large corporations actually who own the hospital. But be an intrapreneur right where you are in a win-win manner. So it will be a win for you where you are more productive. You start seeing way to do things, but it will also be a great win for your company.
Yeah, and for those that don't know what an intrapreneur is somebody who works in an organization and has the funding to start a new project, to start a new product, to develop a new service within the walls of the organization with the funding to do it, with really not a whole lot of expectation of massive revenue gain right away. So an intrapreneur gives you the flexibility to test your entrepreneurial skills with a bit of a safety net. And it gives you the ability to transition your organization from a company that may be a little bit stagnant, perhaps, or doing things as I like to say, the way we've always done it, and move into sort of a modern way of doing things. And it's those entrepreneurs that are going to take us there.
Yeah.
So now you're thinking about, grief, and you're taking on this new role in life. How did you start to build your first set of clients? Because that's a scary thing for an entrepreneur. You're leaving an income, you're leaving what we consider to be safety in the corporate world. And now you're going, well, I'm trained, but can I make any money at this?
Right. So a few things. The first thing is, and the bottom line of everything is, get out of your comfort zone. Get out of your comfort zone like nobody's business. Ask yourself, what is it that you can do that other people are not doing mostly? And at the same time, do what's the proven part too. But we all have uniqueness. And so you want to rely on that. And you also need to be willing to do what's uncomfortable. I know many people who say, I'm not comfortable being on video. I know it'll be good for me to be on social media and on video. I'm not comfortable. Well, let me tell you, Tom, we did not touch this on our previous conversations. I was diagnosed or labeled as a severe introvert. In those Myers-Briggs tests where you have 1 to 10, I was about 11 out of 10 on the introvert part of things. And so never mind speaking on camera. If back in the day or in my early life, if you come and speak to me, I wouldn't even look at you because I was that shy. So ask yourself, and again, allow yourself support, because a lot of time when we're in the picture, particularly if the first month you're like, oh, I was hoping to get 5 clients, I want to get 1, we start to panic. So allow yourself support by somebody who has been doing that, somebody who has walked the path and said, all right, honey, you can only see this, but this way and this way and this way and this way. One of my client right now, she is transitioning. And she's like, I got to do this. And she started thinking about 15 different things that each of them will take 15 hours a week. I'm like, you're not going to do this. Look, she goes to yoga all the time. And every day. She goes to yoga. She loves yoga. I said, what if you just come, she wants to become a coach. What if you come about 15 minutes early and stay about 10 minutes late in yoga every day? There are plenty of women who will benefit from her service. And start getting to know people. Sure enough, within the first month, she bring into her and serve in a win-win manner 2 women.
Yeah.
It's that simple. It's you're already going to yoga. Take your shower in yoga before and after. That's all it is.
Meet people where you're already going to develop your first network of clients and start to build human relationships with them, where they see you as a valued and trusted advisor. That's really business 101 when we start to think about how we build a customer base. And it's interesting that you said that, because there's so many people with specific industry skill that are not really sure how to do this very basic or straightforward, quite frankly, first step in acquiring clients.
Yeah.
So you've got it down, and now you're helping with grief. And I want to unpack this word grief a little bit. So I've been through a whole host of levels of grief in my life. We'll save that for another show. But that's why I'm so intrigued here, is because I have some personal experience with it. So help me understand sort of the phases of grief, how it works, how we can actually fix this, because it feels like sometimes I carry a lot of burden and a lot of weight on my shoulders, and I think others do too.
So a couple things with your questions. Thank you for the question. The first thing I want to say is we don't need to fix anyone who are grieving. And we do want to help you, if you choose to recover from it. But a lot of time the word fix, to start with, when something happened in life, something happened in your life, for many people, when things goes wrong, they feel that there's something wrong with them. And then the way people say it make them feel that there's something wrong even more with them than there is that they need to be fixed. There is nothing wrong with you personally. You experience grief. My heart goes out to you. And if you choose to, there are ways to recover from it efficiently in an evidence-based prompt manner. So how do we do that? There are multiple different venues to do that. Some counselor and therapists are trained specifically in grief. And so you might go that route. Some people discover that unless the counselor are trained specifically in grief, that they've been through counseling and it still doesn't help them. Indeed, 100% of my Suicide Watch clients are in counseling. And the difference between that is counseling, as well as a lot of mindset coaching, address our mind, help us understand and have insight. Grief has very little to do with the mind and practically everything to do with the heart. And so one way to do that, there are multiple different ways. One way that we do that with the grief specialist, including myself, we actually simply teach you a class. You learn the tool that you can use again and again. And that's the difference with counseling. You go and talk it out, but something happened, you got to come back. Now, there is absolutely a place for counseling. I love counseling. But with grief, knowing that life is life, Tom, something happened in the past, something happened now, something will happen in the future, whatever it is. And so we give you tools and skills in a systematic way through multiple evidence-based study of all the institutions that I am licensed with, to help you move through it in a step-by-step manner such that you are able to release the grief and recover from heartbreak. With me, it's a 6 weeks class.
With you, it's a what class? I'm sorry, say that again.
With me, it's as simple as a 6 weeks class.
A 6-week class. So somebody can work with you for 6 weeks in a class and go from some real pain, whether it is loss of life, loss of job, maybe a diagnosis, those types of things that really ail us, or something as maybe more surface level or simpler than some of those big heavy ones?
Well, a lot of time it is something that it's whatever causing you grief. It could be loss of something that you love. It could be a change that you feel you need to adapt. So anything that causes you any of the 40 different causes of grief can that is something. Sometimes some people say, as I grew up and something that I used to believe. So loss of belief is part of grief, actually. I used to believe in this. My family used to do this with me. And now I just start feeling the loss in there. People who are going through retirement, actually, because that's for some people become a little bit of a loss of identity. If you are a banker for 45 years of your life, now you're not. It's actually a change and a loss of identity to a degree. Even people who get married has to move, change their name. That can be a cause of loss. That for some people, like, what are you talking about? You're getting married to your dream partner, but it's a change, and any of those, they can come, and then we can work in a systematic manner. And it's a 6-module. Some people complete it. Many people complete it in 6 weeks. Some people say, I need a couple weeks extra. Everything is actually tailored to you as well in a way that feels good to you and your heart.
So the listeners of this show are typically CEOs, entrepreneurs, founders, those in leadership roles that are managing teams, and intrapreneurs. These are very successful people that listen to the Talent Empowerment Podcast. And what I wonder is, when do they stop pushing through on their own and know it's okay and it's time to raise their hand and say, I need support? That's a really important point, because successful people tend to say, I've got this. And there's got to be a point where we say, I'm a little bit over my skis here. I could use some help. And how do you help people find that point where it's okay to say, I need an additional service here?
So thank you for that question. I love that. So I would say 2 things about that. The first is, how much loss you're talking about leaders, you're talking about people who are in a productive mode. How much loss of productivity do you want while you are continuing to push, trying to be strong on your own? Why? Because grief causes loss of productivity in most way than we could imagine. In addition to that, grief also invisibly, but we've been shown using instruments like EKG, afflicted everyone around us, even those across the room. So how much loss of productivity and how much affliction to your team member and your family and your loved ones do you want while you are going through this? Grief causes us to be confused, forgetful, irritable, overwhelmed. All those, if you take it to the workplace, if you're confused and forgetful, you're not going to be performing at your optimal level. This is why grief costs the workplace $113.7 billion every year in the United States alone. And this is in a 2017 study, so this is before the pandemic. We don't have the exact number now, and when I said we, means the Grief Recovery Institute, but we estimated it's 2 to 3 times that. So the first question would be, how much loss to your team, to yourself, to your company do you want to continue before you raise your hand and say, okay, let help me? And then the second thing is, there is a difference between being strong and being smart. I would say the successful one might keep pushing, but actually, Tom, really, many of my clients are very highly successful people. And the successful one, the true successful one, the one that's on top of the chain, they realize very quickly if things not right and reach out just like that as fast as they possibly can. Many of my clients are highly successful business owner, highly successful leaders, as well as highly successful attorneys and doctors. And you see that the one that's like, okay, you know what? They see this is not an expense. This is an investment. And highly successful people know to invest in themselves as well as to invest in their result, such that you don't keep losing and bleeding productivity, which at the end of the day, losing and bleeding money. And let's get this taken care. I mean, if you have a pipe that break in your house, are you going to say, I'm going to try to keep fixing this here. I'm going to try to keep fixing this. Or you say, okay, you know what? Rather than letting it continue leaking in a dramatic way and causing a rot in the house constructions, let's fix this right now. Some people do wait, but the highly successful and wise one actually allow help. So I usually say, don't be strong, be smart.
Wow, that was a lot to take in. I feel like there was so many key points there that are so important for people. The idea of don't be strong, be smart, is a really important one for leaders, because we tend to just push through. I mean, that's why we're good. And that's why you've climbed the ladder or built the business or become a founder, right? Or you're an entrepreneur, you're in deep management somewhere and you're running great teams. It's because you have that intestinal fortitude. And what I tend to say is that at times our weaknesses are just our strengths that have been overcooked, right? So if you think about that, our strengths get us there, but if we overcook them, they become our weaknesses. And I think you're saying the same thing, in that if you just look at this from a different angle and say, of course you're successful, of course you're doing a great job, but you've got to make sure that you're smart along the way and you take care of yourself. Otherwise, we have diminishing returns on our brain, right?
Exactly,
and we've got to keep it up.
You take care of yourself. You smart. We're not saying, we don't even say it as a weakness. Sometimes things happen, and I put the analogy of wearing a crutch. If you break your leg, would you keep running on that, or would you allow a crutch? And the beautiful things working with me and many of the grief specialists, but the way that including in my book that you can see there, Seeking Peace, I actually very much believe in creating something even better. So creating advantages to all from adversity, creating a profit from pain. And so you will also, every client who has worked with me says, yes, it helped me heal from my heartbreak, but it's also helped me improve my relationship with everybody else, and it's improved my productivity, because you will learn tools and skills in there that will allow you to communicate better, that will allow you to relate with others better. For leaders, those are key things, to be able to communicate and to relate better, to be able to increase productivity. Even when you're not feeling good, you can still be on optimal level. Not so you can be pushing, but sometimes there are just times you got to do that. With attorney, for instance, so there are times they're like, oh God, this is what have you, I got to go to court. So we teach you tools such that you got to go into a board meeting. We teach you tools to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So share with us the impetus for writing the book. I mean, where did this come from? Is it something you always wanted to do? And tell us a little bit about the book.
Thank you. So with the book, it is something I feel called to do. And the book, it's called Seeking Peace, the Proven 5 Fingers Method to Thrive Through Change Effortlessly. Something I wanted to do or I feel called to do. And then, as we know, Tom, in the early 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown and all these things happened. And was the final push of me that's been sitting on this book to say, you know what, you got to get it out like now. And so the book was published at the end of May of 2020, actually, really to help people to navigate through changes and adversities. In the book, I share what I call the 5 fingers method, using your fingers right here in a very simple, straightforward, easy to remember. That's why it's the 5 finger. You have your fingers as the reminders right here. You can also use your 2 toes to go in a systematic and step-by-step way, but not rigid. There's a systematic and rigid. This is of the 5 key tools. You can pick any of them off any day that suits your need of the days. And so that's the book basically is all about how to help people with more ease and confidence move through challenges and adversity.
Well, it sounds like a fabulous book, and we'll put that in the show notes for folks. And if folks are dealing with grief and support, we've talked a lot about the mindset here. Anything that happens to the physical body?
Yes, absolutely. Grief impacted us in such a way that most people can think of. And talking about the physical body, there is actually a very well-known term, takotsubo cardiomyopathy. This was even one of a TED talk in, I believe, 2019. But what happened is grief, when you are experiencing grief, it is basically equivalent to a massive stress to your body. And it causes significant inflammatory reactions and changes in your chemicals and biochemical thing. So much so, in the takotsubo cardiomyopathy, it's basically where where our heart, in general, humans' heart, all of our heart, look a little bit like the Valentine heart. And when somebody is being impacted by grief, the heart changes. The heart start looking like a money bag. So in other words, instead of a Valentine heart like that, it looks like a vessel with a white bottom. And I have a funny sense of humor. And so I say, I guess it's life's trying to tell us that, when you are grieving, if you don't take care of yourself carefully, not only it's impacted you emotionally and mentally, but it's also going to take your money back away. But what happened is the grief caused so much inflammations that we see changes in the heart. We see in flare up. Think about this. Practically many people who are experiencing things, they suddenly start getting ill. They start getting a lot of illness, or they become, now I'm, yes, I already have these things going on in life. Now I seem to cannot stop catching a cold and a flu and what have you. That's because grief influences our immune system, which is many people, we know that in workplace, people who are grieving, and then they start calling out from physical illness. It's influence, the inflammations causes in such a different way. And even after the initial impact of grief, so let's say you don't do anything with that and you just try to push it away, you might not feel the profound sadness or anger anymore. So after the initial intense emotions, but the grief doesn't go away. It actually goes into your body. And a lot of people come to me saying, I have chronic headache, chronic back pain, muscle problem, flare up of immune problem, and so on and so forth, reproductive problem.
Yeah, this is a wide-ranging spectrum of the mind and the body that adjust to the grief or pain, perhaps, that you're feeling. And there's a whole host of symptoms that pop up. And I think what I'm hearing is, don't avoid those symptoms. Listen to your mind. Listen to your body. Don't push through. Don't be strong at that moment. Be smart and get yourself some support, get yourself some help, have this training or conversation with others to push past it and accept it, and ultimately understand it's okay to go through grief, but it's not okay to hold on to it for a long time.
Yeah, definitely. To me, I use the analogy of having a heartbreak, experiencing heartbreak, in a way like experiencing a broken leg. Your heart's been broken or your leg's been broken. Now, the broken heart can feel a lot more painful than the broken leg. And my heart goes out to you. I'm not diminishing your pain. I'm not undermining your challenges. But if you see it, you're having a broken heart, it's almost like a broken leg. Would you go sit on a couch or talk to your neighbor or even go to your primary care physician and say, hey, I got a broken leg, what do you think? You would hopefully go to an orthopedic person as soon as you possibly can. That's the smart thing to do. Not that otherwise it's not smart. I would say that's the wise thing to do, to go to an orthopedic person, get it taken care. So two things. You are able to start recover. So you are able to basically, so you'll be able to recover fully and completely. Sometimes, if let's say you sit on a couch, your leg might heal, but if we many times hear about the legs not healing well and it develop callus and things like that, incorrectly healed. The same thing. You sit on a couch or you go party, or many people in the workplace got really busy and then now I'm just going to start working 18 hours a day so we don't feel the pain. You might not feel the pain, but now you're healing with all your heart with all these calluses. Those calluses continue to cause pain and continue to cause damage. So get it taken care. The faster, the better. And then it will actually allow you to be able to fully heal and go back climbing mountain, if it is your leg, or being able to be fully present, to feel full joy and full aliveness in life. And at the bonus, relate better with our colleagues as well as our loved ones.
Well, for those that are ready to experience change and experience more productivity and find a healthier way to deal with grief, and they wanted to get in contact with you, what's the best way to do that, Dr. Tan?
The best way to do that is to visit my website, joyfulrichesbeyondgrief.com. Joyful riches as full spectrum rich, RICHES, beyondgrief.com.
Yeah, and we'll put that in the show notes for everybody. And thank you so much for sharing your story today. Thank you for taking the leap of faith and going from being a veterinarian and oncologist to taking this path of helping others. If you didn't hear the intro, Dr. Tan has helped over 25,000 people move beyond grief and experience a multitude of changes, both emotionally and physically, in the workplace, with family and relationships. So it's so important that we take care of this. Thank you so much for the work that you do. We're very grateful.
Thank you, Tom. It's a delight to be here.
And thank you for joining the Talent Empowerment Podcast. I hope this conversation has lifted you up so you can lift up your teams, your organizations, and your community. As we learned today, if you've got a broken pipe, call a plumber. If you've got a broken heart, call Dr. Tan. Let's get back to people and culture together. We'll see you on the next episode.